So how do you reveal details? You can focus on the physical, focus on psychology, or focus on ideas. Let's look at each one in turn. Focusing on the physical, we might freeze the action. The writer's first job is to show the reader something. Sometimes the easiest way to do that is to freeze the action. That way, we can pay attention to details one by one. Look at William Shakespeare's freeze-frame description of a young woman in Sonnet 130. Pause the video to read the passage. Pay attention to the details. When you describe a person with this freeze-frame approach, move from part to part to create a vivid whole. Now take a look at the opening passage of Daphne du Maurier's classic Rebecca. Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again. There was a padlock and a chain upon the gate. Peering closer through the rusted spokes of the gate, I saw that the lodge was uninhabited. No smoke came from the chimney, and the little lattice windows gaped forlorn. The drive wound around in front of me. Each detail provides not only the setting, but the mood and the sense that something terrible has happened to this once grand place. Focusing on the physical, we can also follow the action. To create greater energy, we can provide details by moving through space and watching others move, like a tour guide who leads her readers, pointing out site after site as the whole group follows along. The novelist Richard Ford is a master of telling details. In a passage from Independence Day, set in the fictional town of Haddon, North Carolina, Ford meanders toward his details in a slow way to pull you into his world. We drove out in my mother's old Chrysler Newport to the dealership in Hastings-on-Hudson, kibitzed around the showroom for an hour and a half, chin-rubbing, ear-scratching potential young buyers, fingering the mirror surfaces of some olive-drab five-door job, slipping in and out of its sensible seats, sniffing its chilly perfume, checking out the glove box capacity, the usual spare tire mounts and jack assembly, finally pretending even to drive it. Anne side by side with me in the driver's seat, both of us staring ahead through the dealership window at a make-believe road to the future as new Volvo owners. All these details require work to find. When you accumulate details, you can create a bigger, better, more vivid picture to reveal larger truths. Catch them if you can. Still focusing on the physical, we can get sensual. The best details are sensory. They make reading physical. In Why Me?, Elizabeth Gilbert shows Jim McLaren, a Yale grad, theater star, athlete, and all-around good guy, suffering in the hospital after a terrible accident crushed his body. His body was a hot chaos of pain. Every time someone touched him, he screamed. I was all animal impulses operating from the most primitive core of my being. I was too afraid to cry. I'd lost control of my diaphragm muscle and was physically unable to cough. I was afraid that if I started crying, all my tears would fill up in my lungs and throat and literally choke me to death. Just look at the sensory words in this passage. Hot chaos of pain, touched, screamed, animal impulses, primitive core of my being, lost control, diaphragm muscle, unable to cough, tears filling up the lungs, choking me to death. I don't know about you, but I get the chills when I read that passage. So in your stories, give your reader a physical, emotional sensation. Follow Elizabeth Gilbert's model. Still focusing on the physical, we can also explore the quotidian, the ordinary parts of life. The simplest things, the most quotidian, ordinary things can hold great significance. Sometimes just pointing them out like a tour guide offers the best way to describe them. In The Things They Carried, his classic novel about the Vietnam War, Tim O'Brien catalogs the possessions and thoughts of the soldiers in the rice paddies of Southeast Asia to capture how ordinary lives were devastated by the war. Lieutenant Jimmy Cross received a good luck charm from Martha. It was a simple pebble, an ounce at most. Smooth to the touch, it was a milky white color with flecks of orange and violet, oval-shaped like a miniature egg. In the accompanying letter, Martha wrote that she had found the pebble on the Jersey shoreline, precisely where the land touched the water at high tide, where things come together but also separated. It was this separate but together quality, she wrote, that had inspired her to pick up the pebble and to carry it in her breast pocket for several days, where it seemed weightless, and then to send it through the mail by air as a token of her truest feelings for him. To describe details, we can also focus on psychology. And to start, be a voyeur. Details are often voyeuristic. We see what we shouldn't be allowed to see. We peek into someone's private, secret world. Truman Capote once made the wild claim that all literature is really gossip. It's voyeurism in words. Do you really believe that? Of course, it's true. Can you elaborate? It's so obvious I don't have to elaborate on it. All literature, from biographies to essays to short stories, it's gossip. What was the gossip in Gulliver's Travels? Well, he was commenting on the society of his time in a way. It's just such an obvious thing. Alice in Wonderland is gossip. One could write an essay about Alice in Wonderland with Lewis Carroll, who turned out to be a total monster. Gossip is taboo. It's not something we're supposed to approve, and yet we have a huge appetite for gossip and all other taboos. Why? A taboo is something forbidden. It's emotionally charged, something that shames people, and something that reveals the deep, dark truths of human character. Taboos repel, but they also attract, whether we like to admit it or not. Consider Gay Talese's controversial portrait of a voyeuristic hotel owner who spied on the people who stayed at his motor lodge. In this passage, Talese describes joining the hotel owner for a look through the peephole over a room in the hotel. I saw what Foos was doing, and I did the same. I got down on my knees and crawled toward the lighted louvers. Then, I stretched my neck in order to see as much as I could through the vent, nearly butting heads with Foos as I did so. Finally, I saw a naked couple spread out on the bed below. Foos and I watched for several moments, and then Foos lifted his head and gave me the thumbs up sign. He whispered that it was a skiing couple from Chicago. Make no mistake about it, writers are voyeurs in their hearts. They want to see what they're not supposed to see and then share it, gossip about it. Take a look at this passage from Joan Wickersham's The Suicide Index, about the suicide of her father. I went through the bureau drawers and found a broken gold pocket watch in an old jeweler's box from Wiesbaden, and pockets of pins and needles from where he had been president of the family business, and foreign coins and breath mints, and beneath a pile of boxer shorts, a couple of issues of Penthouse magazine. Continuing the focus on psychology, explore taboos. Death is itself a taboo, and when we go there, unflinchingly, we can discover great truths. So, what physically happens when you die? Well, you don't really want to know, but you probably should. For the heart, life is simple. It beats for as long as it can, then it stops. Sooner or later, one day, this pounding action will cease of its own accord, and the blood will begin to run toward the body's lowest point, where it will collect in a small pool, visible from outside as a dark, soft patch on ever-whitening skin. As the temperature sinks, the limbs stiffen, and the intestines drain. And on what happens to the body after death. If you are inclined to donate yourself to science, you should not let images of dissection or dismemberment put you off. They are no more or less gruesome, in my opinion, than ordinary decay, or the sewing shut of your jaws via your nostrils for a funeral dwelling. Or more humorously, dealing with priests at a funeral. It's like farting at skunks. You win some battles, but you lose the war. To describe details, you can also focus on ideas. Start by comparing the familiar and the unfamiliar. I'm talking, of course, about metaphor and simile. Metaphor is when you say that X equals Y. Some unfamiliar X is the same as some more familiar Y. Or X is like some more familiar Y. In The Right Stuff, Tom Wolfe zooms in on his subject, the X-1 aircraft. We take in the details one by one and see how they all relate and fit together. Here's what he says. The X-1 looked like a fat orange swallow with white markings, but it was really just a length of pipe with 4 rocket chambers in it. It had a tiny cockpit and a needle nose, 2 straight blades, only 3.5 inches thick at the thickest part, for wings, and a tail assembly set up so high to avoid the sonic wash from the wings. Take a look at the passage again, and look for the 4 metaphors, the 4 comparisons of things that were there, that he was describing, with things that weren't there. He uses the images of a swallow, a pipe, needles, and blades to describe a revolutionary plane, somehow putting these disparate images together to describe one thing, an unfamiliar thing, makes sense. Find irony. Irony happens when facts and images just don't match, but they're still attached. Somehow it highlights something important. Details can offer delicious irony. Consider this passage from Ken Auletta's profile of consumer advocate Ralph Nader. The 4-door Plymouth barreled along at about 35 miles an hour, lashed by heavy winds that shoved it right and left, pounded by the thickest snowfall of the year. Suddenly, just after midnight, the car skidded out of control, spinning perpendicular to the highway, its momentum carrying it forward, slicing through knee-deep drifts, scraping and jumping a wall of ice, and coming to a halt at a 45-degree angle at the bottom of a ditch, dividing the 4-lane highway. The irony here is that Nader won fame for his 1965 book, Unsafe at Any Speed, which was an expose on the dangerous design of cars. Depicting Nader in a car spitting out of control, well, that's a perfect touch of irony. Now it's your turn. Look all around, right where you are now. Find 3 things to describe. Then describe them first by freezing the image, second by showing action around the subject of your description, and third by finding meaning in the quotidian or the ordinary.